We'll talk a little more NBA with ESPN's own and, of course, a former great player in the league, Antonio Davis, kind enough to join us for a couple moments. How are you, Antonio?
Oh, I'm doing good, boss. How are you?
I'm doing well. Good to talk to you again, and let's get right into it. We'll start with the squad in our backyard, the Philadelphia 76ers. Your first reaction when everything starts to come out to light regarding Jahlil Okafor, just 19 games into his pro career and already a bunch of issues off the court. What's your assessment right now of Okafor and the Sixers?
Well, you know, I watched the kid grow up a little bit in Chicago, and I know a little bit about his background, and he is a good kid. You know, and I think he's making some horrible decisions right now, along with, you know, the pride and the passion he has of winning games and stuff like that, and not being used to being ridiculed like that for being on a team he's on in the situation. And I'm in no way making any excuse for him. But I do know that, you know, given that situation, being 19, I can't say that I wouldn't have had some issues, and that's why I decided to go overseas a little bit and mature before I headed into the NBA. But Philly obviously had to do the right thing. He has to be suspended and figure out how to gain his composure and get back to focus on playing some good basketball.
Look, I understand he's a 19-year-old kid, and you played in the league 16, 17 years, so I know you can speak more to this. You can get into the argument why some of these kids are one and done in college. I don't know if he's mentally ready. Look, physically, he's gifted. He's a double-double. He's going to be a great player in the league. But if you are starting to see all these situations come out, and then he lied about his second video, 2 fights in one night, the speeding, the gun pointing him, all these issues, when do you start to say, okay, this is concern now, because they had to basically go and get him a little security detail, which is a glorified babysitter, just to kind of save him from himself and keep him out of trouble. So you start to look at these red flags. You already know that the Sixers are one of the youngest teams in the NBA. When do you start to realize, wow, this might be becoming an ongoing problem with this kid?
Well, to me, you get ahead of the game, first of all. You know you're going to have a young team. So, and I've been saying this all along, and I don't know if this will solve all the problems, but you got to have a couple veterans on that team that
I agree.
are constantly in his ear about being a professional, about dealing with all the ridicule that he may have to deal with, about staying focused on his goals and getting better as an NBA player. So I do know that you know you're going to have a young team. It may cost you, but get a couple veterans in there. And then the other thing, too, is, hey, I mean, they can't do it, but some of that freedom has to be taken away. You know, after the first incident, you know, let me put it this way: they stayed in Boston after the game, and I'm not blaming anybody for this, but if I know I got one of the youngest teams in the NBA, and I don't know their circumstances, maybe they had to stay in Boston. But I'm not staying anywhere after a game. I'm getting on a plane and getting to the next city, and hopefully it's too late for any of them to do anything. You know what I mean? So it's little things like that you have to do because you got a young team, not because you're babysitting and all that, but just because they're immature regardless. I mean, most 19-year-olds are going to make a few mistakes, and you hope they learn soon enough and early enough to not make the same mistake or make plenty mistakes. And but I do feel he's a good kid. I don't feel like he hasn't gotten into a lot of trouble up until this point. So I would think that coupled with not knowing, not really losing ever in his life like this and stuff like that is really just getting to him. Yeah.
Hey, you're 19. You're the face of the franchise. You know people are going to go at it. You're making $4.5 million. You're going to be a young rising star in the league. People are going to certainly test you, and you know this. It's also the company that you keep as well. And again, a couple minutes with a former NBA player, and of course does a great job with ESPN covering NBA. Antonio Davis. Rich Quinones here. It kind of leads me into this. You mentioned they are a young team. That is also because of you hear the word, the plan, the process, collecting assets, tanking, this, that, the other thing. This is a team that got off to an awful start. They've had 2+ bad years of basketball. Brett Brown, you got to give him credit for trying to hold things together, but you also look at the GM and Sam Hinkie and what they're trying to do with the Philadelphia 76ers. So kind of a two-pronged, twofold question for you. when you look at this, and let's call it what it is, it's tanking.
It's a disaster. It's a disaster. Tanking going bad is what it is. But go ahead.
Well, you just kind of answered it. Two things. There's no way Adam Silver will ever say, you guys got to stop doing this, because as long as they're playing competitive basketball and they're not in cahoots and they're throwing games, it's never going to change. But this, to me, sets a bad precedent for the rest of the NBA if GMs want to start. If GMs, sorry about that, Antonio. See, we still got them lined up. Well, it looks like we lost the connection, so we'll keep it here in a second. See if we can bring him back on for a moment. And you're back there, Josh? Okay, great. You right there, Antonio?
Here. Go ahead.
All right. Sorry about that. See, that's what happens. See, what happens is sometimes when we say something critical, all of a sudden no, I'm joking. So what I was, well, if that's the case, I would never be on the air. Is this bad for the league if you start to see how other teams maybe take this format and this way of trying to rebuild? Because you can talk about even the last couple of years, and I know you played a lot of years with Indiana and then Toronto as well, but the Raptors and teams like the Wizards, their plan to rebuild's a little different, and they were able to get in the playoffs, and they were able to get some experience. But how about this form of rebuilding, the way the Sixers are doing it, and how bad is this for the league?
Let's rewind a little bit and go back to before they started all this tanking and all of that. The problem was, or at least reportedly the problem was, hey, we're always going to be a team that's barely getting into the playoffs or losing in the first, whatever the case may be. So we got to break this thing down to build it back up. Is that what you have too? Is that what you kind of feel?
Well, this is my opinion is, and I'm a little more old school.
Yeah, go back to the beginning before they started tanking. Where did you see the Philadelphia 76ers?
I saw them as
those other guys.
I saw them as a middle-of-the-pack team, but I still maintain this. In the NBA, 7th and 8th seeds, I'm not saying they're going to make runs in the finals, but we've seen upsets, and I think it's invaluable to have playoff experience. So if you're asking me, would you rather be 42-40 and get in the playoffs and lure veterans in over 18 and 60 or this, that, the other thing? I will take the playoffs every year and roll the dice.
That's my point exactly. So with what you're asking me, I think Adam Silver is sitting there, with a little smirk on his face saying, okay, go ahead and try that. This is what tanking is going to get you. If you think that this process is going to get you to the point in 3 or 4 years where you're going to go from middle of the pack playoff team and then you're going to fall off and not make the playoffs in hopes of getting this superstar to get over that middle hump, this is not the way to do it. The way to do it is to constantly get into the playoffs, make a couple tweaks, a couple players here and there, and then luckily you're in a position to make some moves where you get a superstar or somebody that can get you over the hump, and you may have to take one step back, but you're not going to take 10 steps back. And then there's too many factors in this that can ruin it for you. Yes, you draft a kid who is injured. You draft another kid with a boot on. I mean, it just wasn't a bright idea, and there were too many factors that allowed this thing to fail. And it's just not fair to players, to fans, to anybody. And yes, I always believe in processes. If they're working, if they hit marks to say, hey, this thing is working, just be patient with me. But I don't see anything to be patient about. If I'm owner, if I'm fans, I'm really upset about this process.
I know I got to let you get out of here. I want to squeeze in 2 more quickies, a minute on this real quick. If you are a veteran and you see a team, and I know even when you came back the latter years with Toronto and a cup of coffee with the Knicks, but prior to your time in Indiana, if you are a vet and you see every year that there is not a competitive product being placed on the court. One agent said this is going to scare players. They don't want any business playing with the 76ers. It's not going to be a destination. If you're a vet and you saw what they were doing, there are some vets out there that want to play just for the money and collect a check late in their career. But if you wanted to try to go on a team and maybe have a chance on a young team on a rise, with this process, this plan, would this scare you away?
For sure. I mean, I can't even look at the way they spent money and say, okay, at least they're going to spend money and try to get some guys in here. They've spent about $18 million. There's 17 guys in the league, 18 guys in the league making more than $17, $18 million.
Yeah.
So I don't see anything that would persuade me to come there to say, hey, they're doing this the right way. And it is just a process of maturity and growth. They had to take a couple steps back because of injuries, but if they get Embiid back, if they do some other things, then this thing is going to work out. But as a veteran, no, I'm not coming there. There's too many other situations that are a little bit more mature and seemingly are headed in the right direction.
30 seconds before I let you get out of here. Golden State, Curry keeps lighting it up, averaging about 32-40 last night against the Pelicans. They're rebounding. They're shooting threes. They're 20-0. I mean, is it possible they're not only better than they were last year, but they are just a surefire lock to repeat this year?
Well, there's a lot of factors. And this early on, you don't want to say a lock, but somebody that's going to have to beat them, in a 7-game series.
And you got to grind it out, yeah.
Yeah, you're going to have to. And the Clippers will say, you can't get up by 20+. That's not going to work. You can't get them into late-game situations.
That's not going to work.
That's not going to work. So what is going to work? If anybody figures it out, it'll be the first time a team beats Golden State. But until then, they'll keep winning games. It's just they're incredible, man.
It's fun to watch. Curry and Green, they're playing lights out. Antonio, good stuff. I appreciate the extended time. Hopefully we'll talk again. Keep up the good stuff on ESPN.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. You take care.
You got it. Antonio Davis joining us for a couple moments of